The courtroom was silent. No whispers, no rustling papers. Not even the buzz of fluorescent lights could be heard. It was the kind of silence that clung to the skin, that pressed into the ears until they rang with tension. Judge Carolyn Whitaker, known for her stern reputation and icy gaze, peered down from her bench with an air of smug finality. "Miss Thompson," she said, dragging out the name like it tasted sour on her tongue. "You will show proper respect in this courtroom, even if that's something you were never taught." The girl at the defendant's table didn't flinch. Her hands, brown and trembling just moments before, now rested calmly on a folder. Her natural hair was tied back in a modest bun, her posture tall, her chin slightly lifted. She wore a simple black dress, scuffed shoes, and a look on her face that had suddenly changed from frightened to something else, something that flickered like a fuse just lit. The judge leaned forward, voice sharp. "You think you're clever, don't you? Maybe you'd like to represent yourself next. See how far that gets you in the real world." Then, the girl stood up. Slowly, deliberately. The courtroom gasped. With both hands, she opened the worn leather folder she'd carried all day, her fingers shaking slightly as they pulled out a thick, cream-colored document. She turned it to the judge and held it high. "I am representing myself, Your Honor," she said, voice steady. "And I have every legal right to do so. I graduated magna cum laude from Columbia Law. Here's my bar certification." Silence turned to chaos. Gasps. Raised voices. One of the bailiffs knocked over a pitcher of water. The judge's lips parted slightly, her composure cracking like a windshield struck dead center. "You what?" she breathed. "I'm not the defendant," the girl said. "I'm the lawyer. And now, Judge Whitaker, we need to have a conversation about misconduct and bias." The judge's face went pale. And then, the courtroom doors burst open. But to understand why, we have to go back to the beginning. Before she ever stood in a courtroom, before her name was even whispered in legal circles, the girl at the center of this storm was just a teenager walking home from school in the rain. Her name was Janelle Thompson. At 17, Janelle already carried the weight of someone twice her age. Her mother, a former nurse now bedbound from lupus, needed round-the-clock care. Her younger brother Caleb, barely 9, had panic attacks so severe he couldn't sleep through the night. Their father had vanished years ago, the kind of absence that was louder than any presence. Still, every day, Janelle walked past cracked sidewalks and liquor stores, past corner boys who called out her name with jokes too dirty for her ears, and into the heavy doors of Eastview High with a backpack full of textbooks and college dreams. She didn't talk much, not because she was shy, but because talking meant trusting, and trust got broken in her world. Janelle trusted actions. Her grades, always at the top. Her attendance, spotless. Her reputation, guarded like a fragile inheritance. But none of that stopped the world from seeing her as something else. It started small. Freshman year, a teacher handed her a hall pass with the date already written in, because kids like her always try to forge them. Junior year, a school cop stopped her for loitering while she waited for her mom's medication at the Walgreens. The pharmacist had to come out to vouch for her. Senior year was supposed to be different. Janelle had just been accepted into Columbia on a full-ride scholarship, an early decision miracle that lit a tiny, trembling candle in her soul. Then, 3 weeks later, the incident happened. Janelle had been tutoring Caleb in the public library when she heard shouting outside. 2 boys, one white, one black, were wrestling over a phone. Shoving turned to punches. A crowd gathered. Janelle stepped outside to pull them apart. She didn't know either boy. She didn't care. She just knew someone was going to get hurt. Police arrived within minutes. And guess who they grabbed first? She didn't resist. She didn't even argue. She tried to explain. But the officer had already snapped the cuffs onto her wrists before she finished her first sentence. She was booked for disorderly conduct, even though a dozen witnesses tried to say otherwise. But witnesses don't always matter. Not when your skin speaks louder than your voice. The story exploded online. Cell phone footage caught the aftermath. Janelle in cuffs, the other girl crying as she filmed. She didn't do anything. She was helping them. The school didn't defend her. Her college acceptance was put under review, and the court date was scheduled. Her mother cried for 2 days. Her brother blamed himself. Janelle? She stayed silent, again. But this time, she was also angry. And she had a plan. While waiting for the court date, she threw herself into research. She read case law like scripture. She studied judicial bias and prosecutorial discretion. She read about black teens misidentified, mischarged, misrepresented. She saw herself in all of them. So when she showed up for her hearing, she wasn't just another girl in a too-big blazer. She was fire-wrapped in silence. But the court didn't know that yet, and neither did Judge Whitaker. The judge had a reputation. She was known to humiliate problem kids in her courtroom. She made speeches instead of decisions. She turned hearings into morality plays. And she had a particular kind of contempt, quiet, coded, for black girls who dared to speak with authority. Janelle walked in alone. No attorney. No parent. Her public defender had dropped her case last minute. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd asked him to. As she sat waiting, heart pounding, she felt a shift inside her. Not fear. Something sharper. Determined. Judge Whitaker scanned her file with disinterest, then called her forward. That outfit's a little fancy for a juvenile case, don't you think? The judge said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Some people chuckled. Janelle didn't reply. The judge raised an eyebrow. Well, if you're going to act like an adult, maybe we should treat you like one. Maybe you'd like to explain to this court why you think you don't need counsel. And that's when it began. The slow pulling of a thread. I've studied this case thoroughly, Janelle said. Oh, have you now? The judge mocked. What was it? YouTube University. TikTok Law School. Another wave of chuckles. And still, Janelle said nothing. Until the judge crossed the line. You know, young lady, arrogance won't get you very far in this world. Especially not your kind of arrogance. A silence fell. Even the laughter stopped. Janelle stood, walked to her bag, and pulled out the folder. She didn't speak right away. She let the room hang on the edge of her silence. Then she raised the document high. I'm not who you think I am, she said, voice breaking the room like thunder. And just before the judge could reply, before the next breath could even be drawn, the courtroom doors burst open. 2 federal agents walked in. And then everything changed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the heavy wooden doors slammed shut behind the 2 men in dark suits. They didn't wear uniforms, but they had that unmistakable federal weight, broad shoulders, sharp eyes, clipped words. One of them flashed a badge. The other scanned the room, then locked eyes with Janelle. Miss Janelle Thompson, he asked, loud and clear. Judge Whitaker straightened in her seat, lips pressed into a tight line. This is a closed juvenile hearing. Who are you and what is the meaning of this interruption? The taller agent stepped forward, calm but commanding. Agent Ross, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. We're here on record regarding a formal inquiry into judicial bias and misconduct in this courtroom. Gasps again, louder this time. A man in the second row muttered, Holy SH, before covering his mouth. Janelle didn't flinch. She lowered her folder slowly and turned toward the judge. I submitted a complaint, she said, voice low but unwavering. 3 months ago, after reviewing 32 of your cases involving black youth. The shorter agent held up a thin folder. We're following up on several inconsistencies, disparate sentencing, inflammatory language, unlawful detentions. Judge Whitaker's face turned ashen. This is highly irregular. And completely. You're welcome to file a formal response, Agent Ross said, his tone clipped. But we are within our rights to observe proceedings under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. The judge opened her mouth, then closed it. And for the first time that day, Janelle saw fear behind the woman's carefully painted mask. But no one in the courtroom understood how they'd gotten here. Not yet. 2 years earlier, Janelle Thompson was just another face in a sea of high schoolers at Eastview High, a school known more for its metal detectors and dropout rates than academic glory. But Janelle wasn't like the others. She stayed after school not for detention, but to tutor, not for gossip, but to draft essays under flickering fluorescent lights. Her dream wasn't some hazy hope. It was sharp, defined. I'm going to be a civil rights lawyer, she told Ms. Riley, her AP English teacher, one late afternoon. Ms. Riley smiled. That's a hard road, Janelle. Janelle didn't smile back. It has to be hard, or it wouldn't be worth it. She spent every spare moment reading James Baldwin, Angela Davis, Thurgood Marshall. Her room was cramped, her desk barely a foot wide, but she turned it into a command center. Legal pads, flashcards, old Supreme Court opinions printed from the library's spotty computers. She didn't party. She didn't date. She didn't complain. But she noticed. She noticed when her white classmates could leave campus for lunch while she got stopped for wandering. She noticed how often the assistant principal called her articulate. She noticed that security never checked Noah Becker's backpack, but always checked hers. Still, she bit her tongue. She had bigger goals. A full ride to Columbia, a JD by 24, and one day, maybe, walking into courtrooms to defend kids like her brother, her classmates, herself. She didn't know how fast that dream would be tested. It happened on a Friday. She was helping Caleb with math problems, trying to distract him from another hard day at school. He'd been anxious since his teacher yelled at him for fidgeting, and Janelle promised him a trip to the library would help. It didn't. Not after the fight broke out. Not after the cops came. Not after the wrong girl got cuffed. The charge didn't stick, technically. The DA dropped it after public backlash. But the damage had already been done. Her Columbia acceptance was reassessed. Her scholarship was paused. She was told to wait until the next cycle, which meant another year in Eastview. Another year in a house where the power flickered and the food pantry depended on donations. Another year of eyes that looked at her like she was almost, but not quite, worthy. So she dug in. She read. She studied. She applied for an online JD program at the New York School of Law and won a special accelerated scholarship. She graduated in under 3 years, taking double loads while working nights at a local legal aid office. She passed the bar on her first try, and no one knew, because she didn't post it. She didn't tweet it. She waited, because she knew there would come a day when she'd need it. And when that day arrived, she walked into that courtroom alone. Now, as Judge Whitaker sat stiff-backed on the bench, trying to gather what little dignity she had left, the agents moved to the side of the courtroom. "We'll be observing the remainder of this hearing," Agent Ross said. "Continue." The judge stared at Janelle, a flicker of something new in her eyes. Caution, maybe even respect. But Janelle didn't blink. "With your permission," she said evenly, "I'd like to formally move to dismiss all charges as baseless and unsupported by evidence. I have affidavits, video recordings, and multiple eyewitness statements." She placed a binder on the table, clicked it open. "Additionally," she said, her voice growing bolder, "I'd like to present a motion for sanctions regarding your treatment of me today, addressing me as the defendant without confirmation, your comments on my kind of arrogance, and your consistent history of disproportionately harsh rulings toward black youth, particularly girls." Dead silence. Then Agent Ross spoke again. "We've reviewed her materials. We'll be presenting them in our ongoing investigation." The judge's gavel hand twitched. "You're excused, Miss Thompson," she said coldly. "You may leave." "I'm not leaving," Janelle replied, eyes locked. "This isn't just about me." She turned around to face the courtroom. "This is about every student who sat in this room afraid to speak. Every teen whose future was decided by a single person having a bad day. I'm staying, because I've earned my place here." She stood still, shoulders square, chin raised. And that's when the gallery started to clap. First one person, then another, then the entire left side of the room. Clapping, not for a verdict, not for an escape, but for her, for what she'd done, for what she meant. But outside, in the hallway, someone was watching. A man in a gray suit, clipboard in hand, eyes hard. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number. "It's her," he said. "She's the one from Eastview. We need to move now." The man in the hallway didn't stay to hear the cheering. He moved quickly, disappearing down the courthouse stairwell, dialing the number again when it rang out the first time. His voice was lower this time, harder. "Confirm the subject, Janelle Thompson. She's more than just a problem. She's a threat." A pause. "Yeah, she's got her law license. Bar certified. No one saw it coming." Another pause. "No." The judge cracked. Agents were in the courtroom. More silence. Then a long breath. "I'll send the file." He tucked the phone away, pulled a manila folder from his coat, and fed it into the shredder just inside a law office marked Eastview County Legal Affairs. By the time anyone traced that call, it would be too late. Back in the courtroom, Janelle's breath came slow and steady, but her hands still trembled. She felt them hidden at her sides, fingers curling and uncurling, the same way they had when she'd first practiced arguments in her mirror late at night, whispering objections into the silence of her room so she wouldn't wake Caleb. But this wasn't practice anymore. This was real. Judge Whitaker had recessed abruptly, said she needed a moment to consider filings. She'd practically bolted, eyes down, mouth set. Janelle watched her go, then turned to the agents. She's going to retaliate, she said quietly. Agent Ross nodded. We're prepared for that. Janelle raised an eyebrow. Really? Because the last time someone said that, I lost a year of my life. He hesitated, then handed her a card. Call me if anything happens. Anything. She took it, tucked it into her pocket. Not because she trusted him, but because she knew better than not to. As the room cleared out, Ms. Riley appeared in the back row. Janelle hadn't even known she was there. I saw the live stream, she whispered, tears in her eyes. I didn't even know it was being filmed, Janelle said. You made it mean something. Janelle wanted to smile, but she couldn't. Not fully, because in the pit of her stomach, something twisted, tight, and cold. That night, she didn't go straight home. She stopped at the corner diner near the train station, an old haunt she and Caleb used to visit with their mom when she was still able to leave the house. The booths were cracked, the jukebox was always playing 70s soul, and the coffee was terrible. But the quiet felt safe. She sat at the back, legal pad in front of her, pen ready, planning her next move. Because today had been one battle, not the war, and she knew what was coming. When the waitress came by, she offered a free slice of pie. You were on the news, she said, eyes kind. You got him good, baby. Janelle smiled faintly. Thanks. The waitress leaned in a little. Watch your back, though. Old systems don't go down easy. They tend to hit back before they break. Janelle nodded. I know. She didn't sleep much that night. She couldn't. Between Caleb waking up from nightmares, again, and her mom needing new meds that Medicaid didn't cover anymore, the house felt like a dam ready to burst. And in the morning, it did. She got a letter. Official, sealed. From the State Bar Association. Janelle tore it open, her heart slamming in her chest. The words blurred for a moment. Then they landed like bricks. Notice of temporary suspension pending review of ethical conduct. She read it 3 times before she moved. A complaint had been filed, alleging fraudulent misrepresentation and inappropriate courtroom behavior. Signed, by Judge Carolyn Whitaker. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She sat down, opened her laptop, typed one word into her search bar. Retaliation. Then another. Disbarment. And finally, how to fight back. By noon, she was at the office of her old internship, Legal Aid Eastview. The place where she'd worked nights, where the carpets smelled like paper and coffee and the walls were lined with binders of forgotten cases. Her old mentor, Victor Chavez, was waiting for her. I heard, he said. No greeting. Just the weight of what had already happened. I need help, she said. But I'm not backing down. Victor gave a slow, tired smile. That's why we trained you. He slid a folder across the desk. Start here. You're going to file a grievance against Whitaker with the Judicial Review Board. And we're going to make this suspension temporary. She opened the folder, then looked up. But what if I lose? Victor leaned forward. You already won, Janelle. This is them trying to take that back. Don't let them. That night, she found her mom awake in her wheelchair, eyes fixed on the TV. The local news was playing a segment on the girl who shocked the court. The anchor called her a legal prodigy. Her mother said nothing. Then she clicked off the remote. You got your daddy's fire, she murmured. Janelle turned. What? He tried to fix the system, too. Before it ate him. She had never heard her mom talk about him like that. Never heard the edge in her voice. Did it kill him? Her mom didn't answer. Just turned the remote over in her hands and stared at the screen. The next day, someone tried to break into their house. The door was forced, but nothing stolen. Just drawers opened. Files gone through. A single paper left on the kitchen table. A court docket, with her name circled in red. She called Agent Ross. He came within hours. This is bigger than we thought, he said. She stared at him. You think they're trying to scare me? No, he said. I think they're trying to bury you. That night, she stayed awake researching Judge Whitaker's record. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Then, at 3:17 a.m., her email pinged. A single subject line. You're not the only one she tried to silence. A file attached. Dozens of names. Statements. Photos. Court transcripts. All tied to one woman. All going back 10 years. And at the bottom, a single message. You take her down, you take them down with her. Janelle stared at the screen, a chill crawling up her spine. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She picked it up slowly. A voice whispered, if you don't stop, next time it won't just be your house. Janelle stood in the kitchen, barefoot, phone still to her ear, as that last threat echoed in her head. If you don't stop, next time it won't just be your house. A click ended the call. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Her mind ran through every possibility. Was it just a scare tactic? A bluff? Someone watching from outside right now? She scanned the room. Caleb was asleep on the couch, curled in a tight knot under their threadbare blanket. Her mother's light was off. The front door was now reinforced with 2 deadbolts and a steel bar Victor had helped her install earlier that day. But locks didn't protect you from what lived inside a system. Not when the system wanted you gone. By morning, her hands were trembling so badly she dropped the spoon while making cereal for Caleb. He noticed. You okay? Janelle forced a smile. Yeah, just tired. He tilted his head. You don't look tired. You look scared. She crouched down and cupped his face. Listen to me. No matter what happens, I got you. I always got you, okay? He nodded, but she could see the question in his eyes. Who's got you? Janelle arrived at legal aid with the new file printed out and sealed in an envelope. Victor raised his eyebrows when she handed it over. Where did you get this? It came to me. Someone sent it anonymously. He flipped through the contents. Dozens of cases tied to Judge Whitaker. Patterns of over-sentencing, conflicts of interest, unexplained sealed records. Then, toward the back, a statement from a woman named Letitia Branson. 10 years ago, Letitia's son had been sentenced to 7 years in juvenile detention for stealing a pair of sneakers. No prior offenses. Whitaker had personally lobbied for the maximum sentence. He was 17. He never made it out. Letitia's final line in the statement read, I tried to sue. The firm told me not to. Said it would ruin me. I never stopped grieving. But now, maybe someone can finish what I couldn't. Victor closed the folder. She's not just a bad judge, he said. She's protected. Janelle met his eyes. And I'm going to break that protection. They started building the case the same day. Victor called in favors from former clerks. They combed through court records. Janelle reached out to the families listed in the file, organizing private meetings in coffee shops and community centers, places that felt safe. Some didn't want to talk. Said they were too scared. Said they'd tried before and paid the price. But others remembered Janelle's video, the courtroom moment, the folder, the law degree, and they started to speak. One woman recounted how Whitaker sneered when her daughter asked for a public defender. Another father broke down as he described how his son's misdemeanor turned into a felony because he looked defiant during sentencing. Over and over, the stories repeated like an old wound reopened. Janelle took everyone down by hand. No cameras, she said. No recordings. Just truth. And each time she wrote another page, she felt something inside her strengthen, not rage, but resolve. 2 weeks later, she got another letter. This one wasn't official. Just a plain envelope, slid under the door. Inside was a photo, a blurry one, of her, walking home, a red X marked across her face. Beneath it, we warned you. She stared at it for a long time. Then she burned it, not out of fear, but because she knew this fight was no longer just about a courtroom. Victor connected her with a contact at a watchdog journalism outlet. They agreed to run a story on one condition. We need a whistleblower, the editor said. Someone inside the court. Otherwise, it's just your word. Janelle hesitated. Then she remembered a woman, older, quiet, who had worked in the courtroom for years. Not a judge, not a lawyer. A court stenographer named Margaret Lane. She found her through a friend and scheduled a meeting at a downtown church. Margaret looked tired, like she carried secrets in her bones. When Janelle explained what she was doing, Margaret just nodded. I saw it all, she said. Every word, every ruling. I typed it. Will you talk? Janelle asked. Margaret hesitated, then opened her purse, pulled out a thumb drive. I started saving backups, she whispered. In case this day came. Janelle took it with shaking hands. That night, Victor reviewed the files on the drive. He called her at 2 a.m. I've never seen anything like this, he said. She ordered clerks to modify transcripts, made off-the-record remarks that should have disqualified her from any bench. This isn't bias. This is systemic corruption. Janelle's voice was steady. Then we take it to the state. They filed the motion to formally remove Judge Whitaker from the bench on the grounds of judicial misconduct and civil rights violations. They attached testimonies, records, Margaret's files, and then they waited. And the threats kept coming. Another letter, a dead bird on their porch, a brick through legal aid's window. Victor wanted to pull back. Maybe we take a breather, he said. But Janelle shook her head. If we stop now, we teach them fear works. I'm not teaching anyone that. 3 days later, the state announced a formal investigation into Judge Whitaker. News outlets picked it up. The courtroom footage resurfaced. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Justice for Eastview. Hashtag Black Girl Esquire. Hashtag Remove Whitaker. Janelle's inbox flooded with support and venom. People called her a hero. Others called her a liar. Some said she should be grateful she ever got to speak in a courtroom at all. But she ignored them until she got one message that chilled her to the bone. It was a video, grainy, of Caleb walking home from school, alone. The camera panned to the driver's seat of the car filming him. Then a voice said, "You think we won't touch your family?" Janelle screamed. She ran, straight into the night, and into the arms of something darker than she had ever imagined. Janelle tore through the streets like her body was made of lightning. She didn't feel the cracked pavement under her shoes or the late-night wind biting her face. She only saw one image, Caleb, walking alone. Her baby brother, smiling at something in the distance, unaware of the camera following him, of the threat embedded in that voice. "You think we won't touch your family?" She burst through the front door, calling his name before she even got inside. "Caleb!" Silence. "Caleb, answer me." Then a soft thud from upstairs. She bolted up the steps, taking them 3 at a time. Her heart was jackhammering so loud she barely heard the click of the light switch. There he was, half asleep, rubbing his eyes, standing in the hallway in dinosaur pajamas. "What?" he mumbled. "What happened?" Janelle dropped to her knees and held him so tight, he let out a soft oof. "You're okay," she whispered into his hair. You're okay. I just had to pee," he said groggily. "Why were you crying?" But she wasn't crying. Not really. The tears were something else now. Not sadness. Not fear. They were fury. The next morning, Janelle met Victor and Agent Ross at a secured location, a small office building loaned to the DOJ during active investigations. She slammed her phone on the table, showing them the video. "Someone filmed my brother." Agent Ross's jaw clenched. "We've seen these intimidation tactics before, but this is escalating fast." Victor leaned forward. "We need full protection for her family. Now." Ross didn't hesitate. Already in motion. Within hours, a patrol car was assigned to Janelle Street. A plainclothes officer would walk Caleb to and from school. Her mother would have a direct line to the department. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Not until the root of all this was ripped out, exposed, and destroyed. The Judicial Review Board hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. 7 members. 1 room. An entire state watching. Janelle wouldn't just be present. She'd be the one delivering the opening brief. Victor offered to take the lead, but she refused. "I started this. I finish it." But preparing the argument meant reliving every insult, every injustice. Every time she was told she was too aggressive for asking a question. Every time someone called her girl instead of counsel. Every time she was mistaken for a defendant or a clerk or someone who didn't belong. She drafted her opening statement at midnight, with only the glow of a desk lamp and the weight of generations watching her. Friday came too fast. The hearing was held in a government building downtown, one that felt like a fortress. Reporters lined the steps outside. Protesters held signs both in support and in contempt. Inside, it was hushed, a solemn kind of heavy. Judge Whitaker entered through a side door, flanked by her attorney, an expensive man in an expensive suit with a practiced scowl. Whitaker looked different now. Smaller. The arrogance shaved off. Janelle sat at the opposite table, folder in front of her, hands still. Victor nodded at her. "You ready?" She took a breath. "I was born ready." When her name was called, she stood, walked to the podium, and began. "My name is Janelle Thompson. I am a licensed attorney, a community advocate, and the daughter of a Black woman who taught me that silence is its own form of violence. Today, I am here not just as a lawyer. I am here as a witness. I have seen firsthand how one judge, cloaked in the authority of the law, used her power not to uphold justice, but to crush it beneath her gavel. I was mistaken for a defendant in her courtroom, laughed at, belittled, called arrogant for defending my rights. But my story isn't the only one. Over 30 cases reviewed. Pattern after pattern. Children given adult sentences for minor offenses. Black girls silenced, mocked, criminalized for surviving. And when I stood up with my law degree to defend myself, Judge Whitaker tried to end my career before it began. But what she doesn't understand, what people like her never understand, is that when you come for one of us, you wake all of us. She paused, let that silence ring, and then continued with names, cases, documentation, statements. Margaret Lane's thumb drive. The room shifted with every slide she showed, every quote she read. Then she played a clip. Margaret's voice from an old audio backup. Whitaker, mid-sentencing. You kids are nothing but broken clocks. Ticking time bombs. I'm doing the world a favor. A collective gasp. One of the review board members shook his head slowly. Another took a sharp breath. Janelle closed with a final statement. The bench is not a throne. It is not a weapon. It is a seat of trust. Judge Whitaker has violated that trust. She has weaponized her robe, her title, her courtroom. And today, you have the chance to say, no more. She sat down, and the room was silent. Whitaker's lawyer launched into a defense of misunderstood tone, high-stress environments, and taken out of context remarks. But it all rang hollow. The board recessed for deliberation. The whole building felt like it was holding its breath. Victor squeezed her shoulder. No matter how this ends, you already changed everything. But Janelle didn't believe in halfway justice. She wanted it all. She wanted Whitaker removed, disbarred, disgraced. She wanted accountability, not just for herself, but for every name in that folder. The board returned after 2 hours. The lead chair stood. After careful review of all submitted evidence and testimony, the Judicial Review Board rules unanimously to suspend Judge Carolyn Whitaker from the bench effective immediately, pending formal disciplinary proceedings and possible disbarment. Gasps. Cheers. Applause. Janelle's knees buckled slightly, but she stayed standing. Then the board chair turned toward her. And furthermore, we issue a formal commendation for Miss Janelle Thompson, whose courage and clarity brought this case forward and upheld the highest ideals of the legal profession. That's when the tears came. Real ones. Because after all the years of being dismissed, doubted, degraded, they finally saw her. But as she left the courthouse to a crowd of supporters, a black SUV idled across the street. A man inside spoke into his phone. She won. Didn't matter. A pause. She's bigger now. More dangerous. He looked out the window at her. We need to move to phase 2. The black SUV pulled away from the curb with tinted windows and unreadable plates. Its engine was too quiet, too smooth, the kind that didn't belong to any city-issued vehicle. Inside, the man on the phone never stopped speaking, even as the cheering crowd behind him erupted in applause. Yes. No. She didn't flinch. She walked out like a martyr. Like she knows she's untouchable now. That's the problem. A pause. Forget Whitaker. She's done. This girl, Thompson, she's the real issue now. He glanced at a folder on the seat beside him. It had Janelle's photo clipped to the front. A sticky note attached read, Thompson, Level 3 threat. The man smiled coldly. Time to remind her how this country handles heroes. Janelle was still in a daze, the world outside moving like honey in slow motion. Reporters surrounded her, firing off questions. Janelle, what's next for you? Do you feel vindicated? What would you say to Judge Whitaker if you saw her now? She kept her answers measured, careful. She knew the world was watching. I'm not here for revenge, she said. I'm here for justice. The crowd clapped again, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Behind her, Victor kept scanning the rooftops. They both knew this wasn't over. That night, Janelle found herself staring out the window of her apartment long after the city had gone quiet. The ruling had brought a tidal wave of headlines, interviews, even offers, from law firms, think tanks, universities. But all she could think about was that man in the video, the one who filmed Caleb. She still didn't know who he was, or what he wanted, and she hadn't told her brother about the threat. She couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she tucked a baseball bat under her bed and left the porch light on all night. 2 days later, she got the message. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a package, left on the front steps. No return address. Wrapped in plain brown paper. Victor insisted she let the authorities open it. Inside was a hard drive. Encrypted. The DOJ tech team cracked it within hours. What they found chilled everyone. A full surveillance dossier. Janelle's schedule. Her class attendance from Columbia. Logs of phone calls. Emails. Legal aid client lists. Court files. Security camera footage from outside her house. even Caleb's school records. Victor stood staring at the screen like someone had knocked the breath out of him. This isn't a vendetta, he muttered. This is an operation. Ross nodded slowly. And this level of surveillance? It's either government adjacent or someone with serious power and access. Janelle swallowed hard. So what happens now? Agent Ross turned to her, his voice low. Now we find out who's really behind this. Meanwhile, the fallout from Judge Whitaker's suspension spread like wildfire. Dozens of past convictions were reopened. Local media ran stories daily, dragging Eastview's court system into the national spotlight. One night, Janelle opened her inbox to find a message with the subject line. I remember what she did to me. I want to testify. Then another. My son never recovered from what she said in court. We want to be heard. And another. They kept coming. Janelle created a spreadsheet to organize them all. Over 80 names by the end of the week. It was more than a pattern. It was a legacy of harm. But the bigger the wave of truth became, the more dangerous the silence on the other side grew. Victor contacted a friend inside the Department of Justice, a retired analyst who had once mapped corruption in federal contracting. Her name was Dina Holt. She met Janelle in the back room of a library 2 towns over. I've seen your file, she said, her voice dry and sharp. You're too good at staying clean. That's what makes them nervous. Janelle frowned. Who's them? Holt slid over a laptop and clicked open a map. It was covered in red dots. Them is the network. Not one judge. Not one case. This goes all the way up to state-level contracts, private juvenile detention centers, kickbacks for tough-on-crime quotas. Whitaker was just one gear in the machine. Janelle leaned forward, heart racing. You're saying this is profit-based? I'm saying your courtroom victory cost someone a lot of money. Holt clicked again. The map zoomed in on a company name, Cynthian Holdings, Inc. Janelle had never heard of it. Private security, Holt said. Also contracts with youth detention. Also, she clicked, funded the judge's last campaign. Quietly, through a non-profit shell. Janelle stared at the screen. You're telling me they're watching me? Holt didn't blink. I'm telling you they've been watching you since you walked into that courtroom and ruined their pipeline. The next morning, Janelle woke to the sound of glass shattering. She leapt from bed and ran to the kitchen. A brick on the floor. A note wrapped around it. This one didn't bother with subtlety. Drop the case, girl. You're not bigger than the system. One more move, and your family disappears. Her hands shook. She pressed her back to the fridge and tried to remember how to breathe. Victor arrived within 10 minutes. The cops were 30 minutes late. Ross got there in 15. They'd seen enough. You're going under federal protection, Ross said. Janelle shook her head. No, you don't have a choice. No, she repeated. That's exactly what they want. Silence. Disappearance. Fear. She took the brick and threw it across the room. It cracked the drywall. I'm not hiding. I'm going public. Victor's eyes widened. You mean? Janelle nodded. All of it. Every name. Every dollar. Every lie. On record. With receipts. We go live. That night, she stood before a packed town hall, streamed across every platform, thousands watching. She laid it bare. The abuse. The corruption. The money. The system. Everything. Names, documents, timelines. Footage from Margaret Lane's archive. Testimonies. Even the footage from the surveillance hard drive. She ended with a single line. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not the only one. And we're not going away. She walked off stage to a standing ovation. But as she stepped into the hallway behind the auditorium, a man in a hoodie bumped into her, dropping something into her coat pocket. She turned, but he was already gone. Victor reached into the pocket and pulled it out. A burner phone. It rang. She hesitated, then answered. A voice whispered, You don't know the real plan yet, but you're in it now, and the clock is ticking. Janelle stood frozen in the backstage corridor, the burner phone pressed to her ear, the audience still roaring on the other side of the wall. The voice on the line was low, distorted, like someone speaking through gravel and fog. You've woken something bigger than you know, it said. She swallowed hard, pulse thudding in her throat. Who are you? A beat of silence. Then, someone who used to believe in the law, before I saw how it really works. What do you want? Another pause. Then a soft click. Call ended. Victor snatched the phone from her hand, his eyes darting around the dim hallway. We're leaving. Now. Ross appeared at the corner seconds later, flanked by a pair of agents in plain clothes. You're not going back to your apartment tonight. You're coming with us. Janelle resisted. I just told the entire world I wouldn't hide. And you won't, Ross interrupted. But if you're dead by morning, none of this matters. You've stirred the hive. Now they're coming. She hesitated, then nodded. By midnight, she was relocated to a safe house, a nondescript brownstone with blackout blinds and an agent posted at every door. Inside, her mind was racing. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. All she could do was stare at the burner phone, now sealed in an evidence bag. Victor paced the living room, phone glued to his ear. Agent Ross was on the other couch, scrolling through surveillance footage from the town hall. I want to know who gave her that phone, Ross muttered. He knew her route, her timing. He knew exactly when to plant it. Victor ended his call. I've got something, he said. The voice. That wasn't random. Janelle looked up. What do you mean? Victor crossed to his bag, pulled out a flash drive. 4 years ago, a whistleblower tried to go public with information about private detention centers inflating youth arrests for funding. The case was buried. Witness disappeared. The files were lost. He clicked open a video on the laptop. A grainy recording from a deposition. The voice, muffled, distorted, was identical to the one from the burner phone. Janelle leaned closer. That's him. Victor nodded. His name was Elijah Cade. He was a senior data analyst at Cynthian Holdings. Janelle's heart clenched. But they said he was dead. Ross looked up sharply. That's because we were told he was dead. Victor closed the laptop. If he's reaching out now, it's because he knows time's running out. The next day, an anonymous file drop hit the Washington Chronicle. Subject line, Eastview Pipeline, the real numbers. The data dump included spreadsheets, internal memos, strategy presentations, and email chains connecting Cynthian Holdings with public school districts, police departments, and, most damningly, judges. Whitaker's name was everywhere. So were 3 others. Judges, superintendents, lobbyists, even a U.S. congressman. Janelle stared at the screen, numb. They weren't just locking up kids. They were manufacturing criminality for profit, faking behavioral threat scores, creating risk assessments that skewed Black, poor, or disabled students into categories marked for surveillance, detention, intervention. They were building a business model out of Black pain. She turned to Ross. This was never about just me. Or Whitaker. He nodded grimly. It's about empire. The media went nuclear. Every major outlet picked it up. Hashtag Eastview Pipeline trended for 72 hours straight. Panelists debated it. Politicians distanced themselves. Cynthian Holdings stock tanked. Protesters took to the streets. Janelle's face was everywhere. The girl who brought it all down. But inside the safe house, she felt anything but safe. Victor got a message from an encrypted email. They're not going to let this go public without a body. Watch her back. That night, she had a dream. She was back in Judge Whitaker's courtroom. Alone. Only this time, every bench was filled with shadows. Faceless suits. Watching. Whispering. And Whitaker wasn't behind the bench. She was sitting beside Janelle, whispering in her ear. You didn't change anything, she said. You just exposed it. Now they'll burn it all down to bury you. Janelle woke with a start. And the window was open. She never left it open. Victor rushed in with his gun drawn. What happened? Someone was in here. They searched the house. Nothing missing. But on her pillow, a matchbook. From a bar downtown. Inside, a single word scrawled in red ink. Midnight. Janelle didn't hesitate. You think it's him? Victor asked. Elijah Cade wouldn't leave breadcrumbs unless the fire was already coming, she said. We meet him. We finish this. Ross resisted at first, then finally gave her 2 agents, off book. If this goes sideways, he warned, we'll never find you again. Janelle didn't blink. Then make sure it doesn't. At 11:59 p.m., she walked into the bar. Dim, dusty. The kind of place people went to disappear. In the back booth, a man in a hoodie looked up as she approached. Older. Gaunt. But those eyes were sharp. Elijah Cade. He nodded once. She slid into the seat. I thought you were dead. He smiled faintly. That was the idea. Why now? He leaned in. Because they're going to wipe it all. Every record. Every case. Every one of those kids. They're already scrubbing it. And Whitaker. She's not even the worst of them. He passed her a USB drive. This is the kill switch. The board minutes. The full contract chain. International accounts. You release this? The whole tower falls. Janelle clutched the drive. But Elijah's eyes darkened. You need to understand something. What? They'll come for you harder now. Not to silence you. To erase you. The kind of erasure that gets blamed on accidents and unknown assailants. She stared at him. Then why are you giving this to me? Because no one else will fight like you. He stood, then paused. They killed my sister in juvie. 15. Same judge. Same lies. He looked her in the eye. Finish it. Then he was gone. As she walked out into the cold night air, USB clutched in her pocket, the world suddenly felt much too quiet. Victor stepped beside her. Well, she didn't answer. Because a black SUV had just pulled up across the street. Not parked. Idling. No plates. No lights. Then the window rolled down. A hand reached out and aimed a gun straight at her. Down. Victor shoved Janelle to the pavement just as the first shot rang out. The bullet shattered a lamppost above them, sending sparks raining down into the street. Chaos exploded. The bar's front windows shattered as people screamed and ducked for cover. Another shot. Then another. Janelle could barely hear over the thunder of her own pulse. But Victor was already up, gun drawn, firing back. The black SUV screeched away, tires screaming against concrete, engine roaring into the night. 3 seconds later, a pair of unmarked sedans swerved onto the scene, Ross's men. But the shooter was already gone. Victor grabbed Janelle by the arm. Are you hit? She shook her head. Her voice caught in her throat. I don't think so. Ross ran up, breathless. They knew where you were. This wasn't random. Someone's feeding them your location. Janelle stared at the empty street where the SUV had vanished, adrenaline turning her limbs to stone. She clutched the USB drive still in her coat pocket. They're trying to stop this, she said, her voice hollow. They'll kill to stop this. Victor looked her in the eyes. Then we leak it now. Back at the safe house, the team worked around the clock. The USB was encrypted with 3 layers of security. Elijah Cade hadn't made it easy, but that's what told them it was real. Inside were folders. And inside those, truths that had been buried under a mountain of silence. One folder was titled simply, The Exchange. It contained contracts between Cynthian Holdings and Correctional Investment Group, a private corporation with ties to multiple youth detention centers across the U.S. But that wasn't the worst part. There were memos, some marked confidential, describing a system of referral incentives. Judges and school officials were promised bonuses for identifying and reporting high-risk youth. The language was clinical, sterile, but the meaning was genocide by paperwork. Black boys, brown girls, neurodivergent kids, all labeled, sorted, and fed into the machine. At the bottom of the memo, Janelle found a list. Over 4,000 names. Youth, flagged, between 2013 and 2022. Dozens had been through Whitaker's courtroom. Many had disappeared. Literally. Their last known entries were arrest logs. After that, nothing. Janelle felt sick. She staggered from the desk, pressed a hand to her mouth, trying not to vomit. Ross followed her into the hallway. This is a bomb, he said. If you drop this, no one walks away clean. Not even us. She turned on him. Then why are you still here? He didn't flinch. Because I have 2 daughters. And I don't want them growing up thinking this is how justice works. She looked away. It's not justice. It's war. Then pick your battlefield. Carefully. They decided on a dual release. One to the public, one to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Victor contacted the journalist from the Washington Chronicle. She cleared the front page. Janelle wrote the expose herself, an open letter to the American people. It read like a confession and an indictment all at once. She wrote of lies baked into policy, of behavioral scores that had nothing to do with behavior, of funding tied to punishment, of judges turned into salesmen. She ended with a single question. If this system can do this to our children and keep calling itself justice, then what do we call ourselves for letting it? The piece dropped at noon. Within minutes, the servers crashed from traffic. Hashtags flooded the internet again. Hashtag not one more. Hashtag in the pipeline. Hashtag we are all Janelle. Protests erupted across 5 states. Members of Congress held emergency press conferences. The White House issued a statement by evening, a call for a full-scale investigation. Janelle's face was back on every screen. But this time, it wasn't just a story. It was a movement. That night, Ross told her something strange. We traced the SUV that fired at you, he said. It was registered to a shell company owned by Cynthian's offshore partner. But the building? The garage it came from? He handed her a photo. It was a state building, the Eastview County Juvenile Center. Janelle stared at the image. They launched an assassination attempt from inside a public institution. They think they're untouchable. She looked up. Then we prove they're not. The DOJ launched raids that same night. Offices seized. Servers copied. Warrants issued. 3 judges resigned within 48 hours. A fourth, Whitaker, was arrested trying to leave the state. Janelle watched it unfold on a small TV in the corner of the safe house living room. When the camera showed Whitaker being placed in handcuffs, she didn't cheer. She didn't clap. She just whispered, "That's for all of them." Then she turned the TV off. But victory didn't taste like celebration. It tasted like ash. Like every name on that list. Every kid she couldn't save. She sat with Caleb that night, curled up beside him on the couch, watching cartoons. He didn't know everything, but he knew enough. "You beat the bad guys, right?" he asked. Janelle hesitated, then nodded. "Some of them." He blinked slowly. "What about the rest?" She pulled him closer. "We keep going." At 3 a.m., another message came. From the same encrypted sender. Subject line: "They're bleeding. Now finish the kill." Attached, a video file. It opened on an office, dimly lit. A man speaking on the phone. His face clearly visible. Congressman Lewis Frazier. The same man who denied knowledge of the contracts 2 days earlier. In the video, he says, "So what? A few thousand kids get flagged. They're not going to be senators. We're optimizing social cost. Don't be naive." And then, the words that stopped her breath. "If you want Janelle Thompson gone, fine. Just don't tell me how it's done." Victor leaned over her shoulder. "You release this, it's not just the courts. You'll bring down DC." Janelle stared at the screen, then clicked download. Her hands were steady now. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. Because when they tried to destroy her family, she pulled out her law degree. Now, she was pulling out the truth. And the next shot wouldn't miss. The moment the video went live, Washington convulsed. The leak, raw, unedited, undeniable, hit the airwaves like an earthquake. Janelle's name trended in all caps within minutes. Hashtag Janelle expose power. Hashtag Frazier Mistrezen. Hashtag Children not commodities. The footage of Congressman Lewis Frazier's call was everywhere. He wasn't just implicated. He was heard, plain as day, sacrificing the futures of thousands of children with all the emotion of a man ordering lunch. "Just don't tell me how it's done." Those 8 words ricocheted across the country. By dawn, protesters were at the gates of Capitol Hill. And Janelle Thompson had become something else entirely. Not just a whistleblower. Not just a survivor. She had become a reckoning. But inside the safe house, the mood was far from victorious. Victor watched the news from the edge of the couch, one hand gripping a mug of cold coffee. Ross was pacing, phone to his ear, voice low and tense. Janelle sat by the window, eyes on the horizon. Her hands itched, not from nerves, but readiness. "They're going to bury Frazier," Ross muttered. "You don't survive a scandal like this. There's talk of federal indictments. International finance audits. Everyone wants a piece now." Janelle didn't move. "They'll offer me a deal," she said quietly. "A book. A speaking tour. A job with some fancy nonprofit." Victor looked at her, concerned. "And you're not taking it?" She shook her head. "I didn't start this for a job. I started this because they took everything. And they still think they can erase it with apologies." Ross hung up. That wasn't just any call Frazier made. The man on the other end? "We tracked the voice. It's a lobbyist named Granger Wills." Victor's brow furrowed. "That name sounds familiar." Ross nodded. "It should. He was Whitaker's campaign manager." Janelle turned slowly. And in that instant, something clicked. The network wasn't just corporate. It was political. And it was coordinated. They gathered the full web over the next 2 days. Granger Wills had moved money through 3 shell corporations that funded judicial campaigns in over 6 states. Cynthian Holdings wasn't the only company, just the biggest. Dozens of education tech startups were supplying the risk assessment tools. Some of the same companies now had Department of Education contracts. The goal? A self-sustaining pipeline. Test, track, flag, detain, 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 and profit all the way down. Whitaker wasn't a rogue agent. She was a cog in a wheel engineered to look like justice and turn like slavery. When the Senate Subcommittee on Criminal Justice called for a full investigation, Janelle was asked to testify. Not behind closed doors. Public. Televised. She hesitated. Victor pulled her aside that morning. "You know what this means. They'll drag me through the dirt," she said. "They already are. Now drag them through the light." She walked into the hearing in a gray suit. No jewelry, hair in a neat bun. No makeup, just truth. The room was packed. Cameras, reporters, lawmakers. Some looked at her with admiration, others with contempt. She didn't care, because she had facts. She had names. She had proof. When the chair recognized her, the room fell silent. Janelle unfolded a small sheet of paper and began. When I was 17, I was arrested for breaking up a fight I didn't start. I wasn't charged because I was guilty. I was charged because I was there, black, female, and visible. But that arrest was just the start. It led me here, to this courtroom, to the names I uncovered, to the children this country locked away in silence and pain, while it called itself civilized. And now that I have your attention, I'm going to make sure you feel what they felt. Every boy locked up without a hearing. Every girl whose name became a number. Every parent told, we're just following protocol. This wasn't justice. It was trafficking, laundered through law. She held up a folder. These are the receipts, the money trails, the contracts, the transcripts. You can't pretend anymore. You either dismantle this machine, or you are complicit in it. When she finished, the room sat in stunned silence. Even the opposition didn't speak, because some things can't be argued with. Pain, truth, fire. And Janelle had brought all three. That night, she received a message from a blocked number. Just 2 words. We're finished. She stared at it, then deleted it, without flinching. Within a week, Whitaker was formally disbarred. Cynthian Holdings filed for bankruptcy. Frazier resigned. Granger Wills was indicted. But Janelle didn't celebrate, because the system she had cracked was only one face of the monster. There were others, waiting, and she wasn't done. 1 week later, she opened her own firm, Thompson Justice Initiative, pro bono for the first year. The clients? Kids flagged by predictive systems, families crushed under court fines, mothers silenced by fear. Her first case? A 14-year-old boy arrested for non-compliance after missing 2 days of school. His mother had been hospitalized. No attorney wanted it. She took it, won it, then moved on to the next. But somewhere, in a boardroom high above the city, men in suits watched her rise. One of them tapped a finger on a tablet. She's not just a threat anymore, he muttered. Another man leaned in. She's a problem. They shared a look, and quietly nodded. Because systems like theirs never fall in silence. They go down swinging. And Janelle? She'd just declared round 2. Rain slid down the courthouse steps like silver threads as Janelle stood under her umbrella, a quiet figure against the storm. She had just walked out of a preliminary hearing for another pipeline victim, a girl named Amari, age 15, arrested for verbal aggression after standing up to a teacher who mocked her stutter. The judge, new, young, and nervous, had dismissed the case after Janelle submitted evidence of the school's punitive history. No bravado, no fireworks, just facts, just justice. And still, Janelle felt the weight pressing deeper. Because with every case she won, the system found new ways to retaliate. That night, she returned to her office, just 2 rooms in a converted building near the Eastview train station. She'd kept it small, close to the people. The lights inside were still on. That was the first sign. The second was the smell, burned plastic. She drew her pepper spray from her bag and stepped in slowly. The files were untouched, but her laptop had been fried. Power cords melted. The hard drive casing cracked. On her desk, a single word was scratched into the wood. Enough. Victor arrived 20 minutes later. He took one look and said, "They're watching everything again. You're a fire that won't go out. So now they're trying to smother you." Janelle folded her arms, jaw clenched. Then let them try. The next morning, a private message came from a secure legal email address. Your filings have been flagged for irregularities. Please respond within 24 hours or face temporary suspension. Janelle stared at it. Again, she whispered. Victor read over her shoulder. They're pulling the same move Whitaker tried. Only this time, they're hiding behind red tape. Ross arrived within the hour. We traced that email. It didn't come from the state bar, he said grimly. It came from an IP registered to Sable Insight. Janelle's brow furrowed. That's not a legal organization. No, Ross said. It's worse. It's a digital security contractor. Private. And guess who funds them? He tossed a folder onto the desk. Cynthian Holdings. Or rather, what was left of it. Its ashes had been bought, quietly, by a strategic recovery fund, under the name Crown Marlin Equity, a hedge fund known for scooping up distressed corporate entities, restructuring them, and funneling them back into public contracts. In other words, the pipeline was rebuilding itself, under a new name, a new shape, same purpose, same threat. They're rebranding the pipeline, Janelle said, voice low. They're doing more than that, Victor replied. They're learning from their mistakes. Going quieter, smarter, Ross added. We've got whispers of new tech pilots in schools, AI-based student risk scans, behavioral prediction software. No arrests, just invisible decisions. No paperwork, no protests, no fingerprints. Janelle closed her eyes. They weren't just rebuilding the machine. They were upgrading it. That evening, she went to see Margaret Lane, the retired stenographer who had helped crack the first case. Margaret was frilier now, thinner. Her hands shook when she poured tea. I saw the news, she said with a smile. You're still swinging. Janelle nodded. They're changing tactics. But the goal's the same. Margaret sipped her tea. And what's your goal now? Janelle looked out the window. To tear down whatever they rebuild. Margaret nodded slowly. Then you'd better take notes. Because they've got a head start. A week later, Janelle was invited to speak at a National Education Equity Summit. She was cautious. Her face had become a symbol, her presence a threat. But she accepted. And during her speech, she unveiled a new project, the Light Archive, an open-source, publicly accessible repository of flagged student records, whistleblower statements, detention data, judicial rulings, and contract trails. No more hidden files. No more forgotten names. She ended with one line. We will not let the machine rename itself and keep moving. We will trace every tooth of every gear until there is nothing left to turn. The crowd erupted, but she saw them. 2 men in the back. Not clapping, not blinking, just watching. 3 days later, her bank account froze. Then her law license portal was locked. Then a false claim of evidence tampering surfaced, anonymous. She and Victor scrambled to respond. Ross worked channels behind the scenes. But the attacks were relentless. Digital, legal, psychological. They weren't just trying to discredit her. They were trying to erase her again. Victor looked at her one night after another long meeting. We can fight this. We will. Janelle shook her head. They don't fear my name anymore. They fear my blueprint. And that was when she realized. She didn't need to be the only one carrying the torch. She needed to share the fire. The next morning, she launched the Firelight Network, a coalition of young lawyers, tech analysts, educators, and students, trained to spot the patterns, trace the networks, build the cases. By noon, over 200 people had signed up. By week's end, it was over 5,000. And growing. That night, she got another burner phone. Another call. The same gravel voice. Elijah Cade. You open the gates, he said. They won't close again, she replied. Silence. Then, you ready for what's next? She smiled, tired but fierce. I was born for what's next. But outside, in a different city, a new boardroom lit up. Men and women with unmarked faces and expensive suits watched Janelle's speech on a screen. One leaned forward. Activate Delta Protocol. Phase 1. What about the girl? He smirked. She's not just a girl anymore. She's an ideology. A beat. Time to dismantle her like one. The sky over Eastview cracked with thunder as a storm rolled in. Thick, angry clouds that seemed to echo the tension pulsing through the city. Janelle stood at the window of her office, watching the rain slide down the glass in jagged lines. Across the street, a familiar car idled too long. Again, she didn't need confirmation. She already knew. They were watching her. Still, maybe always. Victor stepped inside, his face grim. They froze the Firelight Network's funding. Janelle turned. All of it. He nodded. Every donation flagged for potential laundering. Total smear job. And it's spreading. Janelle crossed her arms. Let me guess. Coordinated. Victor didn't answer. He didn't have to. Within 72 hours, major news outlets that had once praised her pivoted. A hit piece dropped late Friday. The Rise and Reckoning of Janelle Thompson. How a hero became a headache. It called her reckless. Uncredentialed. Claimed her law degree was under investigation. It wasn't. Implied her Firelight Network was funneling foreign funds. Also false. Social media followed like wolves. She was called a fraud. An opportunist. Even an enemy of the state. And underneath it all, bots. Thousands of comments. Identical phrases. Artificial outrage. Victor showed her a digital audit. It's a synthetic smear. Coordinated data push. Probably funded by Crown Marlin. They're building an alternate reality, Janelle murmured, and forcing the public to choose which version of you to believe. But that wasn't the worst of it. The Firelight Network's servers were breached. Encrypted documents were stolen. Case files, statements, names. The kids. Their families. Their advocates. The threat was no longer just public image. It was safety. Ross arrived that evening, face pale. They leaked the archive, he said. Janelle blinked. What? They posted fake documents inside your database. Forgeries. Made it look like you doctored records. They're calling for an FBI investigation. She staggered back into her chair, breath knocked from her lungs. I built that archive to protect them. I know, Ross said softly. And now it's been weaponized. For the first time in months, Janelle almost gave in. Not to fear, but to grief. The grief of watching truth get twisted. Of knowing that power never sleeps. It adapts. She stared at her reflection in the rain-dappled window. She looked older, more tired. But beneath the weariness, the fire still flickered. She stood. No more defense, she said. It's time to go offense. That night, she recorded a message. Not for news outlets. Not for allies. But for the people. Straight to camera. No lighting. No makeup. Just her. They're trying to rewrite the story. They want to make me the villain, because they're afraid of what happens when someone like you realizes they've been lied to. This isn't about me. It's about the kids who disappear into courtrooms and never come out the same. It's about data that turns children into threats before they ever learn to write their names. And it's about power that will lie, fake, burn, and kill just to survive. I'm not backing down. But I can't win this alone. So if you've ever been silenced, stand up. If you've ever been flagged, labeled, punished for surviving, speak out. If you've ever been erased, come back. Let's make this system fear us for once. She posted it. And waited. By morning, it had 5.3 million views. But something was different this time. It wasn't the numbers, it was the faces. Young people from across the country started posting their own stories. I was flagged at 12 for anger issues. I was just grieving my mom. They told my mom I needed discipline, not therapy. I ended up in juvie. I got labeled a risk for doodling a skull. They said I was unstable. I was an artist. Thousands of videos. Thousands of names. Hashtag not a fear score. Hashtag we are the evidence. Hashtag Thompson did not lie. Janelle watched the flood with tears in her eyes. They hadn't silenced her. They had amplified her. Victor came running into the office that afternoon. Whistleblower just emailed. You need to see this. He opened a file. At first, it looked like a standard audit, budget lines, vendor names. But then Janelle saw it. A payment to Sable Insight, dated 3 days before the smear campaign began. Another to a firm in D.C., listed as Narrative Strategy Consulting. She opened the attached invoice. Itemized charges. Suppress document leak. Discredit target via legacy media. Disrupt fundraising pipelines. Erase digital footprint. At the bottom, target, Janelle Thompson. She stared at it for a long time. Proof, she whispered. They planned this. Victor looked at her. What are you going to do with it? Janelle closed the file and smiled. That evening, she walked into a live interview with NBN Nightline, the same network that had run the hit piece. But this time, she didn't come to defend. She came to expose. She brought the files. She named the names. She outlined the payments. The forgeries. The bot farms. The state contractors. The playbook. And then she held up her own file, the one they'd tried to erase. My name is Janelle Thompson, she said to the camera. And this is not a reputation you can destroy. It's a revolution you built, with your corruption, with your fear, with your greed. And now, it belongs to everyone you try to silence. The network tried to cut to commercial. They failed. The feed was hijacked. By her team. Live streams. Mirror links. Subtitles. Reuploads. TikToks. Hashtags. It couldn't be stopped. They had thought she was a name. A headline. But she had become something else entirely. An idea. A movement. And the thing about ideas? You can't kill them. That night, her office was bombed. No one was hurt. Victor had warned her not to sleep there. But the message was clear. End it, or we end you. She stood in front of the burning wreckage. The crowd around her held candles. No chants. No slogans. Just silence. Until Janelle lifted her hand. No more running. she said. No more surviving. She pointed at the fire behind her. We rebuild. Stronger. Smarter. Together. And the crowd, children, mothers, lawyers, janitors, students, roared. Because this was no longer her story. It was theirs. And power had never been more afraid. The sun rose over Eastview with a sharp, golden defiance, burning through the smoke still curling from the ruins of Janelle's office. Where most people saw destruction, Janelle saw clarity. They had made their move. Now, she would make hers. She stood at a podium in front of Eastview's courthouse steps, the very place she had once stood in handcuffs as a teenager, misjudged, mistaken, humiliated. Now, cameras flashed in silence. Not out of voyeurism, but reverence. Behind her stood 100 members of the Firelight Network, shoulder to shoulder. Behind them, thousands more. Students, clergy, former inmates, teachers, judges, journalists, mothers and fathers who'd once been too afraid to speak. She leaned into the mic, her voice low but resolute. They bombed my office. They hacked my life. They tried to rewrite history. But here I stand. And I'm not alone. She held up a small black chip, the USB drive Elijah Cade had given her months ago. This drive holds the truth they wanted to bury. And today, we release the entire archive. Every contract, every policy, every false report, every erased child. You will not unmake us. The crowd erupted. She clicked the remote. And around the world, millions watched as the archive went live. Not just to legal organizations or journalists, but to everyone. A people's tribunal of documents, names, ledgers, emails, audio files, predictive risk score algorithms, and case records. It wasn't just a drop. It was judgment. Within hours, the U.S. Attorney General announced a federal investigation into systemic corruption in the juvenile justice system. Within days, Crown Marlin Equity's board members began resigning en masse. Within a week, Congress called for emergency hearings to pass a new bill, the Thompson Youth Justice Protection Act. It would ban for-profit juvenile detention, outlaw AI-based student profiling, require transparency in judicial campaign funding, and create an independent oversight body for youth cases nationwide, named after the girl they tried to erase. But for Janelle, the biggest moment came quietly. 3 weeks after the archive went public, she received a letter in the mail. No return address, just a drawing. Crayons on construction paper. A stick figure girl in a courtroom. A caption scrawled in a child's handwriting. I want to be brave like you when I grow up. Janelle wept. Not because of the weight of the fight behind her, but because of the future ahead. One not carved out of survival, but of choice. At the next Firelight Summit, she spoke from a rebuilt stage, made from the charred remains of her old desk, repurposed as a reminder. She told them, power doesn't fear destruction. It fears exposure. And now that we've seen behind the curtain, we will never go blind again. In her final public interview, a young reporter asked, do you ever wish you'd stayed silent that day in the courtroom? Janelle looked off into the distance, the memory of that day flashing behind her eyes. The judge, the file, the silence before the storm. Then she smiled, not out of pride, but peace. No, she said, that was the day I stopped being a girl they could disappear. In the years to come, she would go on to mentor hundreds of young lawyers. Caleb would become a teacher. Her mother's health would stabilize, just long enough to see her daughter's name carved into the plaque outside the new Eastview Youth Justice Center, dedicated to every voice that once went unheard. And Judge Whitaker? She would vanish into history. A footnote, not erased, just irrelevant. Because Janelle had shown the world something far more powerful than vengeance. She had shown them transformation. In the final line of her memoir, Janelle wrote, they tried to bury me in their courtroom. I built a new one on top of their graves. And the world would remember that when one girl raised her voice, armed with truth, law, and unshakable fire, a system built on silence finally learned what it meant to listen,